Hey guys, my name is Keenan Bulnamore. I am a student at Western Michigan University, and I am applying to neurosurgery match this year for 2022. I wanted to make this presentation just to help students who are in my position who might benefit from this information because I don't have a home program and I didn't realize how important it is to understand a lot of this information as we apply into neurosurgery before diving into it. So hopefully this helps you. If not, this will probably be a little bit longer, so skip to whatever part you need to go to. But I hope this helps even just remotely in any way for you. So I guess first off, it goes without saying really that you really have to work hard in all your years of medical school. The first and second year, my mentor who introduced me to neurosurgery, he's like, you have to crush your grades, you have to do well on your boards, you have to basically commit yourself to excelling in everything, whether or not it comes naturally to you. And for me personally, it really doesn't. So it really resonated with me that I had to work hard, and everywhere I went, everything that I could do to give myself an advantage studying wise, I would do and I would try. And in the long run, it really does help patients to do our best. So hopefully that's obvious, but these are just a few memories of the joys of the first and second year. So then the question starts to be asked about third year and grades and performance and what goes on our evals and those kinds of things. Because there's so much that culminates in the third year. And I guess I have these 4 points here to kind of share the tips and advice that I got as I went through the process. So with clerkship grades, the question is, how important is it to honor every one of them? And I think we all ask that not so that we can see how little we can get away with doing, but when you're in the trenches of your gen surge clerkship and it's hour 90 on the week and you are still expecting yourself to go home and study, this question gets louder and louder in your head. And so I think barring the baseline expectation of ourselves to do our absolute best everywhere we go, it's not necessarily essential to honor every clerkship. If you don't perform as well as you want on a clerkship, on a shelf exam, then it's not the end of the world. And I've had a couple of attendings talk to me about this when I sought guidance from them. And they're like, we have to know that you want to do well, and that you've done well. But if you're applying neurosurgery and you don't honor OBGYN, it's not that's not a red flag. So at the end of the day, what they're really looking for with shelf scores, clerkship grades, and board scores is whether or not you can pass the residency boards. So the ABNS, the American Board of Neurosurgery. And obviously with step one going past fail, that's going to become even harder now. But for now, as long as we can show in any standardized way that we can do well on these tests, then they want to see that it's not going to be a struggle for us. So then there you go down to step scores, and now obviously with step being pass fail, we're going to look at step two, or they're going to look at step two. And I think it's the same thing. They need to know that there's some way to measure how well we're going to do in residency on our boards. So if you do have a step score, the question a lot of times becomes, what's the cutoff? I've heard of the lowest cutoffs being like in the 220s for neurosurgery. But I also know of residents who are in the 230s. So I think it's a range, and it changes from institution to institution. But I think there's information out there, the Neurosurgical Atlas and the Neurosurgery Match. Those websites can share what's kind of a safe zone, which is usually around like 240, 250, to be guaranteed that you really won't have to worry at all. And again, back to the seeking mentorship and people who have been in it and look at students who are going through it. They like to share, that a lot of times there's sometimes a trade-off between how well you do on STEP and how poorly you do with patient care. So can you communicate with patients well if you score 270? Obviously, that's flawed, and maybe they're just trying to make me feel better, which they probably were. But I think it's important to remember that at the end of the day, it's not the most important thing, and the reason there's a cutoff is to make sure that you're going to do well enough on your residency boards. So I have these other 2 points here. The top right one, the NRMP data, is just a reminder that you can find information about who's matching and who's not matching on the NRMP website. And then the last point, I think is the most important. Being present, being available for your patients. It's the single most educational thing you can do for third year, because what you're doing is absorbing so much more from all the aspects of your patient care than you would from 5 practice questions. Those are so important, the practice questions, but you really will learn more if you're all in on your patient care. And the other thing about this is, if you know what to expect as far as working hard and being a self-starter and getting after it, those are the kind of the plans that I went in with, and it was really, really rewarding. You just have to remember to stay humble and just work hard, and you'll kind of learn a lot in a really awesome way. So enough of that. How about fourth year? So on the right here is my my fourth year schedule, and we're a little bit different at Western because we schedule everything out down to the very last day. So we were really involved in how our fourth year looks. What I got to do was kind of realize what's important, and so I put the slide in here for those people who don't have the schedules already made for them ahead of time. I think all of us hopefully have some say in it, but it's really important that we have some priorities. And so here's a list here, 1 through 4, of what's most important. And I think as long as we remember that the sub-internships, the away rotations, are the most important parts of our year, then everything else can really fall into place. But those have to take priority, and you cannot schedule things when you're supposed to be impressing a hospital and getting a feel for that hospital system. Because at the end of the day, especially with us being virtual, they will know who we are. They've seen us for a month in the trenches, and there's really no better way to evaluate a candidate than being in person. And so when you're on your sub-I, that's when you have a huge advantage. So I'll talk about that more, but I think it's just kind of a reason to put that as your top priority. So one of the things that I wanted to do to make sure that I did, especially without a home program, is make sure that I was as prepared as possible for neurosurgery before I went. And so we have community surgeons here, and they're very supportive, and they allowed me to get in the OR, scrub in, be first assist, help out in the OR, and made sure that I would be left knowing, or at least looking like I know what I'm doing. So with that being said, they're not going to necessarily hand you every opportunity. And so I think it's important for us to also realize that we will never be in a position like this again, where we are students and people are almost always willing to say yes. So ask to round with the team in the mornings, even if that means you have to wake up at 4:30. Ask to be in cool cases. Ask around for interesting patients in the clinic. Do everything you can to learn from these patients, to see them, so that when you see them again on your sub-internship and when you're on your away rotation, that you can say, yeah, I'm familiar with this, or I've seen this before. And even if you haven't, or you won't see it again, or if you don't think that your community practice is going to be that edifying, do it anyways. because there's nothing, literally nothing, that's below us as medical students that we can't learn from, even especially the basics. So that was my approach to attacking my fourth year before my Subeyes, is just like master the basics, and then anything extra, like I'm gonna try and find it and go after it. And I hope that served you as well as it served me, but it really did. And I'll let you read the other points here. If, just they're self-explanatory. So the wonderful VSAS. The point of VSAS is to make things fair, I think, and centralized, which is nice. It's a little bit confusing, but hopefully your school takes as good a care of your application as mine did. So when you think about your Subeyes and how to plan them, like I mentioned before, especially now when things are virtual interview-wise, the Subeye is a unique opportunity to show people who you are, because a 20-minute interview is not enough for anyone to know what you're going to be like for 7 years. And on the flip side, which is a point about interviews, is it's not enough for you to know what that program will be like for 7 years as you grow into a surgeon. So it's really important for you to understand the weight of choosing your Subeye, because I think for me the question was, could I legitimately end up here, or would I be in over my head, while they prefer the students who have home programs or are from UCSF or Harvard or UCSD or what have you, some prestigious program that's definitely not Western Michigan. So there's some thought that has to go into it. It can't just be applied to 10 places and say good luck. But then on the other hand, you want to take advantage of opportunity like this, because you don't know when you'll ever be able to go anywhere in the country again for a month of a unique opportunity like this. So it does carry a lot of weight, and it requires some thought. But at the end of the day, once you're there, hopefully who you are shines far brighter than where you're from. So the other point here is just to make a to-do list, take care of all the housing, the onboarding, make sure you're in touch with the program coordinator who's in charge of the rotation. Get everything in order before you go. Tickets, housing, hotels, whatever you need. And that way it's all taken care of. Because if, unfortunately, this happens, if there's some hitch that comes up and you have to relocate in the middle of your rotation, then you're not also scrambling to do a couple other things. So make sure it's all taken care of first. So the wonderful Subeyes, it's such a cool time, and it's a time to learn, and it's a time to grow. Of course, you want to impress these places with who you are and what your character is. But I think a part of who we are, especially as students who are really trying to pursue this career without so much guidance as having a home program. Part of that is really just being engrossed in the environment and learning as much as you can. You really are seeing things you've never seen before, seeing things you've never even read about, or sometimes only have ever read about. So it's just such a special time. I think you should have a system, because life can be pretty fast paced in those Subeyes. So I'll talk about it a little bit later, but there are some apps that I think are worth relying on to both organize yourself, your learning system, and also to organize kind of your plan of attack for doing well in these rotations. And then just remember, like, you're evaluating these programs to see if you can end up here just as much as they're evaluating you. So don't forget that. Here's some pictures of what's been seen on the rotation. Just a lot of cool things here that I never saw while I was at my home hospitals. You'll see things you've never seen before, and it's just so rewarding. So now, here's the mention about the apps and things that you might need. I think by and large, as far as medical student knowledge, the Neurosurgical Atlas is certainly the most valuable thing that you will use multiple times every single day for during your sub-I. Um, it has everything from the setup of the patient to the procedure, the relevant anatomy, things that could go wrong, grading scales, everything that you might need. Just type something that you've never heard of into that search bar, and you'll usually find it in Neurosurgical Atlas. The other app that I think is very important is the CNS Survival Guide. It's if you're more prone to like quick references and tables, you can find them pretty easily on here. I didn't use it as much. Actually, I hardly use it at all, maybe a couple times, but it was still pretty helpful to rely on for a couple of tables or quick references for things like anatomy, or like, for example, the Spetzler-Martin grading scale. And then the Neurosurgical Atlas has a website as well. It's where it was all started. So if you're on your computer, I think things just kind of happen faster on the computer than with an app. But bookmark that website. There's another one called CNS Nexus, which is a video source. It's a case-based video source. So they have a case, and then they have the development of that case from presentation to going to the OR. And they have written out, what the setup would be, what would the positioning of the patient be, and all of those things, which are so helpful because when we're students in the OR, we're helping set up the patient. That's one of the times that we can actually get our hands on and sometimes even lead that process. So that's a really valuable resource. And then the video portion of CNS Nexus is the critical portions of the surgery, which are really nice. So you'll be able to see the surgery before you do it, luckily. And then lastly, Greenberg. It's more of a I kept mine in my backpack, but I don't think I ever referenced it or read it. It's just not really that helpful to me at the moment. I think it'll become more useful as a reference when I'm a resident, but for now it's just one of those things that people like to see that you have because it's quote unquote the gold standard. And then lastly, I use Google Drive as kind of like my central hub for everything. I think having case logs is so helpful for our education and learning. I just made a little example here of what I would do for every case. You have an HPI, the setup as you recall it, the operation as you recall it, and then the post-op check and a follow-up if you followed up with that patient. And I think those things are important, particularly the setup and the operation, as well as the HPI, because it tells most of the story up until the procedure, which is essentially why we're doing it and how we did it, which those are where the questions come from. And then the operation itself, it helps you identify the relevant anatomy. It helps you identify all the things that you might need that are pretty essential as far as knowledge-wise. So try and do that for every case. And then if you're particularly ambitious, you can add maybe a relevant article or two relevant articles and summarize those as well in your case log, which I tried for a couple, but it's really time intensive and you just don't have the time to do it for every single case that you see, because you'll see hopefully upwards of 40 cases in a month, maybe more. I think this slide is kind of the most important as far as your performance in your sub-Is, because we've heard of the 4 A's: be affable, available, able, and accountable. They're essential because in some ways your sub-I is a popularity contest. How good are you at getting along with the people around you? That's a huge part of evaluating a student for residency, and it should also be a way that you evaluate the programs and the residents around you, the people who will be leading you, your chiefs, your seniors, your co-residents, because if you don't share the same skill set of soft skills that are really important for you, then it can be a tough 7 years no matter where you are. If you're at a traditionally really nice place versus a hardcore place, it's really it really comes down to who's around you in your 7 hardest years of your life. I'll let you read these points here, but really I just wanted to say, like, these are the quintessential qualities of your sub internship. And they also cover your ability to say yes to opportunities and be willing to learn. Here's another part of the case logs. You'll get on your interviews, what's your favorite case? Just make sure that you've picked one, and the case logs will really help you, because you'll have your HPI. They're going to ask you why the patient needed the operation, what was a presenting complaint. They're going to ask you, what was your favorite part of the case? What did the patient come in with? What was the follow-up? And those kinds of things. And that's exactly what you've covered here. I will say that this is a little bit different from the example I had in the previous slide, because this is how it all started. I initially started with just the bare bones of the case and using take-home points. So what did I learn about the case? And I think that's important, but it's not as in-depth as what I had eventually turned it into, with information about the operation and the follow-up and the post-op checks, which are important for growing as a student and a surgeon and a resident. The take-home points are kind of hit or miss as far as how much I really actually use them. But regardless, whatever you do, it's still going to be helpful, even if it's a bare bones thing like this. So lastly, I wouldn't be here, and I don't know anyone who would be where they are without a mentor in this crazy process. So that goes for outside of your Subeyes, but actually particularly in your Subeyes as well. When you go into your Subeyes, there are two people that you need to seek out. One, you have to find an attending who you think you mesh the most with, or at the very least that you look up to the most, and really try and stick with them and get into their cases more frequently. Get to know them a little bit better. Obviously, you don't want to be overbearing, and you don't want to make it, you're like avoiding other responsibilities just to get in the OR with this person. But it's so important to have somebody vouch for you who you get along with, that's on the inside and can say, I can vouch for this person. I got to know them over the month, and I think they'll do great. The other person that you should seek out and feel out to make sure that you mesh well with is a resident. And the resident is somebody who you'll see, way more, because it's your everyday life with them on your sub-I. But you have an opportunity to spend even more time with them, which is why it's important to get along with them, because you can take call when they're on call. You can go into the ORs where they're at. You can just spend time with them and get to know them, and make sure that they are also in your corner as well, so that they can show you the ropes, they can give you advice on the trail, but they can also vouch for you if you end up really loving that program. And then obviously there are people that you can stay in touch with and should stay in touch with, because one day they'll be your colleagues. And then I hope this goes without saying, but I actually didn't exactly know this when I started, so if it's not already set up for you, it's absolutely essential that you set up a meeting with the chair, the program director, and hopefully that mentor that I just talked about. But at the very least, the chair and the program director, sit down with them, ask them important, useful, interesting questions, get to know them, and make sure that they've gotten to know you, and then ask for a letter of recommendation from the chair, because it's really, really, really essential that you get a letter of recommendation from the chair of the department. Not only because it reflects that they look positively on you for your rotation, but also because these chairs pretty much all know each other. So no name kind of goes unnoticed as far as the chairs go. And so one name can give you, 3 or 4 or 5 extra interviews. So lastly, about your sub-Is, have this checklist. You can screenshot this or pause it or whatever you need to do, but I think it's really important to have a checklist like this. Reach out to the people that you need to reach out for ahead of time. Get things squared away. Make sure that you've spoken to the people and know what to expect. The chief resident or someone who's already done their sub-I there, someone that you know. Make sure that you've taken care of everything. This is kind of a skeleton version of a checklist, but I think hopefully this gets you started. Wonderful, ERAS. I don't know if you can click that ERAS link there, but I put it there anyways. You'll get used to this interface. It's wonderful. If you're on a Mac, I put these screenshots here because what you need to do in order to identify the people who you've asked for your letters from, you need to scroll all the way over to the right side to make sure that their letter has been uploaded or confirmed for upload. And then there's an actions tab here as well. But it's all on the same page. It's really kind of confusing, but if you scroll as far as you need to, then you'll have all the information you need. I just need to say that as a disclaimer because I spent hours being confused and asking people around, and people who are far smarter than me had figured it out. Hopefully that helps you, but I think it's safe and a good idea to ask for more letters than you need. The maximum amount of letters that you can upload for each program is 4. But if you have more letters than you need, it's really it's really kind of like a safe time to say that you, if something goes wrong or you really kind of, lose faith in a letter writer or something like that, then you have someone else to fall back on. So without a home program, I asked for the chair of our surgery department, the program director of our surgery department, the clerkship director of our surgery department, and then a couple of my mentors from the community hospital, as well as the chairs from my sub-Is. You want to ask for a deadline that's about a week in advance. I would say a week in advance from what the actual deadline is. On the right's a screenshot here of an interaction that came literally down to the wire. It was due on Wednesday morning, and I was sending a message as politely as I could about just confirming that the letter is ready to be uploaded. So I think at the end of the day, back to the soft skills, you absolutely have to be formal, polite, and appreciative. Because at the end of the day, like, these people are writing you letters, they're vouching for you. They're basically putting their reputation out there for you to honor them. And so even if they wait a long time to upload, or they're too busy really to commit to writing like a long glowing letter, they've said yes, and they really believe in their ability to write something that reflects how they feel about you. And that's something that, honestly, like, we didn't do anything to earn it. We didn't like save these people's children. We didn't improve their career. Like, they're doing it because they believe in us. And so it's so important to remember that. And I think that makes it easier to always be polite, be patient, be understanding. And remember that one day we might be in a position like this too, where it might be hard to do what we want to do, but we've still committed to someone and followed through with our promise. So always be polite. And at the end of the day, like, if this letter writer didn't get the letter in time, then I would have had a couple extra letters to submit. So it wasn't a huge deal at the end of the day, but it's really important to remember that they don't have to do any of this. With planning your interviews, I think I put this in here because the Society of Neurological Surgeons, the SNS, they're kind of the governing body who make the statements about what can and can't be accepted for interviews, interview season, whether we're going in person or virtual, whether we can do second looks or not, when we start doing interviews and sending interview invites. So keep an eye on this website. The second point here is just about what happened this year. I stopped getting interviews invites, like things really slowed down near like early to mid-November. So it was really hardly a month and a half that this interview season kind of started. And then afterwards, it's just kind of when people decline an interview, if you're next on the list to be offered. So that's kind of how those get set up, and you can have interviews kind of trickle in. But for the most part, that's kind of how mine worked this year. I'm sure it changes every year, but just wanted to be transparent about that. When it comes to planning, I think there's definitely a lot that you should be doing ahead of time. Here's interview dates in Excel file format here tab, and you can download that and get your Excel sheet kind of squared away. And so what I did was take this massive sheet of data and look at the dates that they were going to interview or planning on interviewing. And then I made a couple extra tabs for each month and kind of cross them off as I went in order to kind of stay organized. And then if I got an interview on that day, I would kind of highlight the box red, and I would make bold the name of the program that I would be interviewing and turn that red as well. And it helped. I made another tab with a running list of the places that I was getting interviews at, and with like when the happy hour was, if there were any extra documents that I needed to sign and submit beforehand, and so on and so forth. You can reach out to me and like ask for examples or just to see mine. Just because I want to be transparent and fair to everybody. You know, I'm totally willing to kind of help anyone who wants to be as prepared as possible. So here's a timeline here of just important dates in your process, starting in January of your third year. Starting with getting your personal statements drafted, written, asking for letters. And this year flies by, so you really want to do your best just to enjoy the process and slow down when you need to, but remember that, you know, we're here because mid-March is that big day, and so it seems so far away, but it's really not. And then May comes around, and before you know it, you know, you're going to be a resident. So it's just a whirlwind of a process, and I think we're all looking for guidance where we can find it. So that's why I did this. But I totally understand that, you know, we don't all have these amazing resources and these mentors. But I just want to kind of share this because I want to be that resource for anyone who might need it. Lastly, just kind of remember that we're not in this alone. You know, I could never do this by myself, and so I think it's important to recognize the people who support us, and hopefully you can do the same and honor them in every way that you possibly can. So thanks, guys. I hope this helps. Once again, reach out to me if you need to. If this is completely useless, sorry for wasting your time, but I really hope that one day I can see you, meet you in the ORs and in the conferences and see everybody succeed. So good luck. Reach out if there's anything else you want to know. All right.